All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the February 16th meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee and the House Ways and Means Committee. We have on our agenda for today two bills that we're going to discuss, and one starting with HB 291 that we are planning to vote on. So why don't we just jump into HB 291. This is election law, contested election, sponsored by Delegate Kaiser. We did pass this bill last year. It was unanimous in committee and unanimous in the House. And as everyone knows, this bill generally makes it more viable for candidates and ballot petitioners to contest elections. It establishes and changes thresholds that are related to when a candidate or a registered voter can petition for a recount, and when a county, as opposed to the petitioner or the candidate, has to pay for the cost of a recount. So in terms of who pays, the bill changes the threshold when a county has to pay by making it so that the county pays when the gap in votes is 0.25%. So between the winner and the highest vote getter in terms of a regular candidate race, when that gap is 0.25%, that replaces what's currently a threshold of 0.1%. So it would allow in general for more recounts by increasing that threshold. So outside of this threshold, a candidate would have to pay for their own recount or pay to contest the election. The bill also allows contributions and expenditures to be made from a campaign committee for the cost of contesting an election, and it establishes a path for a public campaign finance committee to raise the funds to contest an election. It also currently prohibits a recount, though, where the gap is more than 5%. And that is what the amendment that you have before you is going to be discussing. So let's talk about the amendment. That was an overview of the bill. I want to focus in on the part of the bill that prohibits recounts where the gap in votes is more than 5%. Stan, did I forget anything so far? You want to say something? Okay.
No, you covered everything.
Okay. Oh, Delegate Griffith has his hand up before we go into the amendment. Was there a question that you had?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just quick question. Do we have an idea in 2018 and 2014 respectively how many races this would have impacted? And then, of course, the cost associated with that estimate if you project that out over each of the statewide elections.
Does anyone from the state or local board have an answer, or Stan?
Well, I can just, I'm sure that Jared and Catherine Berry can weigh in as well, but just a couple of examples. So the Montgomery County Executive's primary in Montgomery County in 2018 would have been able to be recounted at county expense if this bill had been in effect then. And there was a county council race in Prince George's County in 2014 that was, and by the way, that Montgomery County primary for a county executive was a 77 vote race, and it was not within the threshold for a county funded recount. And then there was a Prince George's County council race in 2014 that was decided by 6 votes. And that was also outside the current threshold for a county funded recount, and that would have been able to be recounted under this bill. So those are 2 examples.
My question is, and they get that, and I really appreciate it. Do we know how many races across the state, though? I'm just trying to estimate out costs, especially for, like, Montgomery County obviously has much more means than a much smaller county to do a number of recounts, right? So I'm just trying to get a sense of how many races do we have? Do we have any? It's a lot of data to sift through, so it's not an easy answer. But do we have any sense of how many races would have defaulted to this in 2018 or 2014?
Delegate, sorry, if you want me to answer.
Sure, please, anybody.
So I guess the thing was, I don't have a specific number, but it was not going to significantly impact the number of races. The percentage between 0.1 to 0.25 is enough for it to make it a reasonable adjustment, but it's not going to make it so that all of a sudden races are constantly being, in this free category here. So but like Stan said, there was probably maybe 2 or 3 in that time period that may have probably hit in that. And the cost also depends upon the race that's being sought too. So you have a delegate race, which is a smaller number versus say a county-wide race for county executive. So, it's a scaling type of system there, but it's not going to, I would say, significantly increase the number of recounts statewide throughout the counties.
Thank you.
I don't think I see any other questions. So moving on to the amendment.
Madam Chair, there are a couple of questions.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see them. Let's go Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Long.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, you had said moving on to the amendment, and I guess my question really is on the amendment.
Oh, okay.
So, Stan, can you just clarify with this amendment, does that conform it to the form in which the House approved it last year? Or are there any remaining differences?
This would make it the same as what the House passed last year.
Okay.
With the exception that the House added on risk limiting audits last year,
Right.
but that's not part of these amendments.
Okay, thanks.
Just so everyone is clear on the amendment, what it does is that it removes the provision that says that a candidate may not petition for a recount if that win-lose gap is 5% or greater. So it basically, the bill currently limits the ability to do a recount if the threshold is at a certain percent. So with this amendment, there would be no prohibition on a recount. However, keep in mind that in terms of who pays, with the other part of the bill, if it's it's 0.25% to have the county pay. So this, as you all may recall, this was an amendment that Delegate Shoemaker had proposed last year that we had accepted, and this is how we had passed the bill out. So we don't have to do it again this year, but I'm sharing it for discussion to see if the subcommittee is still in the same posture. Delegate Long, did you have your hand up before?
Yes, I did, but it was on the amendment and you answered my question.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns on the amendment? Delegate Lasanti, were you saying something?
Oh, to myself
Oh.
out loud. I was just affirming that I still support the amendment.
Great.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Do we have a motion on the amendment?
Let's move.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All right, hearing none, all in favor of this amendment to House Bill 291? 291. Please raise your hand.
I can't raise my hand. Aye.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I see a unanimous vote accepting the amendment. So how about we move the bill as amended, and then we'll have any further discussion on it at that time. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on HB 291 as amended? Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor, raise your hand, and Delegate Long, let us know where you stand.
Yes. Aye.
All right. Okay, perfect. I see unanimous, and subcommittee HB 291 moves forward favorable as amended. Did I just see a baby, Delegate Long? I love it.
New grandbaby.
That's my
Oh,
grandson.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Congratulations. Bringing us some joy on this Wednesday.
Where's he at? Here he is.
Oh, what a
Oh.
cutie.
Now you're gonna drop him.
Perfect.
Looks like
This
his
is
grandfather.
the best election law meeting, subcommittee so far.
Sure is. And I'm glad we have another subcommittee member there. Awesome. Great. So moving on to HB 327. This is Delegate Jones, election judges minimum compensation. And this bill is just for discussion today, talk it through a little bit. For this bill, it basically sets a flat minimum for all jurisdictions to pay election judges a minimum of $200 a day at minimum. And the bill doesn't take place until October 2023. So hopefully it would not put budgets out of whack for this upcoming election too much. There would be some time for implementation. So I just wanted to, I think that we understand the positives of this, of course, recruiting judges, getting a bit closer to paying them for the worth of their work, although 200, of course, is just a start for the value of the work that and the help that they provide in our elections. But wanted to talk through some of the impacts, especially hearing from the board, answer any questions. This is just for discussion, so folks should feel free to ask any questions, and we're just going to kind of work through this bill a little bit. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern, of course, is always the physical note, the physical impact. You know, right now with the number of days of early voting, if it was just an election day situation, we only have 1 day of voting, I think it's a little bit easier to absorb. But when you expand it, of course, across to all early voting days, and at some point, say we decide to expand early voting, right, then exponentially from there. So I'm just certainly concerned about the physical impact with all the other mandates that are upon us. You know, I just think it's tough. That's obviously, I agree with you. You know, they're certainly worth being paid, and you know, and they're certainly very valuable to the process. But it's just, you know, in Harford County alone, we have a huge teacher shortage right now. We're gonna have to pull money from every direction to try to fund teacher raises, because we're down 100 teachers right now in Harford County, and I just don't know where money's coming from for anything right now in the current environment. So.
A very fair point. Can we get a sense from either the local or state in terms of just cost assessment? Maybe Catherine, Mary, Jared, any comments? And do you have anything on what, I guess?
So I'll go first, and then if Catherine wants to join in. Some of the counties already kind of have this floor of 200, but it's not universal across the board. So the impact across the counties, as the fiscal note, we kind of went through that with the fiscal note and MACO and everyone else, was that we wanted to make sure that the impact was like less than $1 million statewide across the board here. I mean, so this is kind of trying to raise the profile of election judges. Basically, they do a lot of work so that they kind of get a bare minimum. If counties want to go beyond the $200, that's fine. That's up to the counties. It has flexibility, but it kind of like raises the C level for all the counties to get that same quality of work across the board with minimal impact on them. And so it's not overall, I would say, a financial burden on them that would occur with this bill.
Okay, so to unpack that a little more, the jurisdictions that are not at 200 yet, those are they would see more of the fiscal impact to bring themselves up. But in general, this is, folks are somewhere. Every county is somewhere, 100, whatever it may be. So it's not that they are, completely, it's not a mandate of, the full 200 necessarily. They're going up from whatever their minimum is. Okay. that makes sense.
And Chair, if you don't mind, if I can just add one little point here too. The effective date is for the 2024 election, so that the counties have time to budget accordingly for this and prepare for it. And this will help with recruitment in all across the boards here, because as you can see, every election judge recruitment is always a very difficult process, and it seems to be getting harder with the pandemic.
And Delegate Wilkins, if I may add also, some of the local boards are looking at just maybe a $25 jump to the $200 for some of their election judges. So it's, I think, a little bit smaller of a number of counties that would be impacted by this. But as Jared just said, I mean, our election judge recruitment right now is just a lot more difficult because of the political environment that we're in, because we are still dealing with COVID. And then, we always have the people just asking questions about why they are not paid more money. With extending the hours of early voting that we did in the last General Assembly session, now we are just trying to get, like in my county, they don't want to pay, the county doesn't want me to be able to pay my election judges the same for early voting as they do on election day, even though the hours are the same. So kind of just trying to set that floor standard will certainly help us with that recruitment effort. And, moving forward, as my county, I have a lot of big precincts, have like 8,000 voters. So exploring, in the future, maybe something with more of those big precincts, vote center concepts, that's also going to help save a little bit of money in the budget, because we wouldn't have to hire as many election judges. And so the fiscal note kind of would balance out in future elections, depending on, the will of the body in the future. So.
Got it. Thank you, Catherine. That's really helpful. I saw Delegate Jones and Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I just wanted to point out a few things that, first off, we have 11 counties that already meet this requirement. And so there's just 13. I think Catherine brings up an excellent point that they're not far off from this. There is no statewide floor for our election judges, which seems somewhat amazing considering the qualifications to be a judge specifically states that they should be, quote, physically and mentally able to work at least a 15-hour day. So we're asking judges not to even, in some counties, not to receive anywhere near minimum wage. So this isn't necessarily like, they're coming in for 2 hours or they're coming in for 3 hours. I do want to highlight that this is a 15 out. They have to be prepared for a 15-hour day. So in my county, that would be $11 an hour in Anne Arundel. And for where my mom was an election judge for about 18 years in Allegheny, that equals out to $5 an hour. Another thing that's really important when hearing from Anne Arundel County, that we are down 650 workers that we need for the election. We're in a really hard place right now. So I just wanted to outline that and bring the subcommittee's attention to the Attorney General's letter, which you can find in your floor system, of their letter of support, as well as MACO's letter of support and several others. So I really thank you so much for letting me highlight a few things that I think are really important when discussing this bill. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Delegate Jones. That's really helpful. Delegate Lasanti, and then
Yeah,
Delegate
just
Ray.
very quickly, and I guess maybe my question is for the bill sponsor. I mean, I support the bill. I was just curious about, I thought that MACO supported the bill with amendments, and I was just curious if they had discussed with you any particular amendments.
Yeah, so MACO supported the bill, and they hinted at some shared cost. They didn't, I don't believe they submitted a specific amendment, but they hinted at potentially having some cost sharing with the state so that funds would not only come from the local jurisdiction. I I would point out that currently, I believe, someone correct me, that election judges are paid through the local budget.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that would definitely be a change there, but it's certainly something that we can consider.
I just really wanted to say, I mean, we're talking about the fiscal year 2024, and by the estimate in the fiscal note, we're talking about $600,000 statewide. Having sat on many budget committees and as a county council person, this is a minimal amount of money for the outcome. So I don't, and I know MACo doesn't like mandates. I know local governments don't like mandates, but I think sometimes you have to, it's in our best interest to do that.
All right, thank you, Delegate Lasanti. Delegate Griffith, then Delegate Long and Baby.
Thank you for the second bite of the apple. And I'm risking asking a stupid question publicly, so please bear with me. By paying election judges, does that not create some pathway or opportunity that someone could state, since they're now paid, that they're subject to minimum wage laws and will be required to be paid the minimum wage of that jurisdiction?
Election judges are already paid.
Yeah, they're already paid.
In every jurisdiction?
So,
See, I told you it was about to be a stupid question, so I'm glad.
But it's a discussion, my friend. It's okay.
and if I may clarify the process of paying election judges, there is always confusion. It is supposed to be I guess a stipend. So for all intents and purposes, they're not supposed to be going on official payroll and that kind of thing with the local governments. But what we have had happen is for people that work multiple days of early voting, election day, anybody that makes over $600 is now required to, have tax paperwork, get put on payroll, and all of those things that happen. So it has complicated matters a bit. And in fact, a few years ago, I did have an election judge that, it just confuses things a little bit because of recruitment. We can't just get people to work one day of early voting. We have them work multiple days to help with training and all of those things. So just would like to point that out.
Well, as my first year on this committee, I withdraw my stupid question. Thank you.
Well, that actually was a good question because it sparked a question for me. Catherine, can you give us a sense, when you have an election judge, do they usually work the entire early voting and election day? Are there people who just work one day? Sort of what, I'm sure it varies from place to place, but if you can just give us a sense of, are we talking about a couple people who are there the entire time, or is it kind of mixed?
It's a mixed bag. It also comes back to training. If we train them to work and they're willing to work multiple days of early voting and election day, that's that many less people we have to train. So yeah, it's all over the place in each county.
And how many do we need per voting location?
How many election judges?
Yeah, is it just the one, or is there's a few there?
So it varies based on the size of the polling place. So if you have 8,000 voters, sometimes we could see up to 30 election judges in that polling place to manage that. Smaller precincts with 500, 1,000 voters, you could manage with 5 to 10 election judges. Just depends. With adding precinct level ballots and things, we do have to have more election judges to manage that at early voting centers. But
got it. Okay, so quite a few people. Delegate Long.
Yeah, thank you, Madam. I have a question. What about, is there any way that we could possibly exempt them from paying state taxes and help?
Yeah, that's a good question. So can someone say more about where that $600 threshold comes from? Is that just general Maryland tax law? And I think Delegate Long's question is a good one.
So I can answer that a little bit because we did think about this prior to in Mako, in Mako and Mayo before this as ways to kind of increase election judge turnout here. There seems to be something, and Stan can probably go a little bit more because I know that he's a tax expert on this as well, that, that locals get their revenues from income taxes and everything, and that there's like a formula here that we didn't necessarily want to disrupt that entire apple cart there. And so this was kind of the best solution that was kind of developed, which was to just raise the pay, keep it as a stipend. And then if certain thresholds are crossed, well, then, that's something that gets crossed with that individual. But, I think that we were just trying to make sure that we were doing something for the presidential election year to making sure that we had enough election judges out there without necessarily getting too far into the weeds of tax law and everything else. But if that's something for further discussion, I think we'd be happy to kind of have that and bring in the counties and stand and kind of draft that with the impact of like making it tax exempt or having some sort of tax rebate on that as well. But it was definitely a little complicated initially.
I can just add something to that, which is that because it's a stipend, taxes are not withheld. So, I mean, I'm an election judge and I report that income as miscellaneous income on my income tax, but I suspect a lot of judges are not necessarily doing that. So I'm not sure how meaningful it would be to provide an exemption from taxes for this small amount. And even if people were reporting it on their income tax, it would be a very small reduction to exempt them from state taxes. So
I was just, if I might, I was just curious if they didn't have to, if they weren't given a 1099 or they didn't have to file a 1099, wouldn't that make it more easier for them to file their taxes? And wouldn't that be more attractive? I'm just throwing it out there. Thanks.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the good question, Delegate Long. Delegate Jones.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Stan Ward. This one, just what an excellent example of a citizen. What a lucky district, an example from 30A. So I just wanted to highlight two things, and thank you so much, Chairwoman. One is that the fiscal note for all those, it is $600,000 statewide. And then when we break that, that down, that is in fact statewide. I wanted to highlight that, breaking down to about 46,000. And the true hardship to get folks is pretty serious with everything that we have going on. So I'm so thankful for the conversation. I have if anyone here needs information sent along or follow-up questions, please pull on me. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments about this bill? All right, I think this was some really good discussion. We'll definitely follow up to see if this is one that we'll move forward with, but I think there were some really good questions, and it seems like the main questions are just related to mainly the cost and making sure that it won't be too much of a cost burden on jurisdictions. But hopefully this will be one that'll help us to get a little bit more recruitment from our election judges. So unless there's anything else for the good of the order, we've reached the end of our agenda in just 32 minutes. This is an efficient subcommittee. And we also just had 2 bills. So unless there's anything else, we are adjourned and we'll follow up with you about the next meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Good day, everybody.
Thank you.